Hello guys, welcome back to another exciting tutorial. Today we're going to continue with the events. So last time we kind of talked about the event settings and what all of these things here do. So in this next episode we're going to talk about event pages and as well as the event commands themselves. I'm not actually going to get into details with the event commands because I'm planning on doing another side tutorial series where I just show you guys how to do common stuff in RPG Maker, like for example how to make NPCs, how to make a day and night system using events. So we'll go more in details with those systems with those episodes, but with this particular one we're just gonna run through what the different settings and sections of the event commands do. So let's get started. So before we actually talk about the event pages, let's revisit the page conditions, right? So these conditions here pretty much determines whether if this event page shows up or not, right? So you could either use a switch. You have an option to use two switches. So if this switch is on, then this event page will show. If this switch and this switch is on, then this event page will show. And again, you could pick one or both of them if you like. And also with all these events conditions, you could pick as many of these options as you want, and you can mix and match however you want, as long as this event page meets the condition this event page will show. And what do I mean by event pages, right? So let's say for example, if you click on this new, you will see another tab here that says 2, and you see how it resets everything. So that means that this is a brand new event page, and as long as these conditions are met, whichever event page is the highest order will show up. So in this case, if I ran this game, this event page 2 will actually in fact show up because all the conditions are met, because it has no conditions and it has the highest order of 2, right? So variables are kind of like switches, but they keep track of values, right? And you only have an option for one, and then you could pick which it is, and then also what value this event will show up on. So for example, if this event 147 has a value of 6 or higher, then this condition will be met, right? This one is for self switch, and again we're going to talk about all these things. Just know that that's what goes there. So self switches pretty much are switches, but they only pertain to this particular event, so they don't carry over to the other events, while the regular switches are global, so you can access them from pretty much anywhere within the engine that takes switches, right? Items pretty much let you select an item. So if the player has that item in their inventory or their party, then this condition will be met. And then an actor is if an actor is in the party, this condition will be met, right? So using your different conditions, you could have different event pages, right? So for example, if I have this switch set to be on event page 2 and I have everything here blank, when I run this game, actually let me also make it so when she says she catches me, she will turn on the switch, and we're going to make it turn on that same switch, right? So here we go. So let me show you the event pages in action. So right now she's on event page 1. So when she catches me, she's going to say caught you, then she's going to turn on that switch that she needs to get the second event page to turn on. And since the second event page has a higher order, right, it goes straight to that event page, right? Don't worry about why my guy changed. He changed because that switch controls the character creator, so don't worry about that, right? So those are the event pages, right? And you could have, I believe, up to 20 of these. Yep, you can have up to 20 pages, right? Do with that information as you will. I rarely ever use more than a handful of these, right? So let's get to those event commands, right? So there's a lot of event commands and they're broken up into different sections, right? So messaging controls everything that has to do with messages, like for example showing the player the player text, having the text scroll like an end screen. And again, I don't want to go in detail with all these little settings because I'm gonna make full-blown videos for all of them, so don't worry. So these just have things to do with controlling the text and things that the player sees. Input number is kind of different, and also select item is kind of different, where it shows the player for input item, it shows you some numbers, and pretty much you have to input what number you want, and depending on what that number is, this variable right here is set to that number, right? And then select text is the same thing. You select the variable, and then when the player selects an item, the item ID becomes that variable value, right? Game progression controls how the game progresses. So pretty much the things that keeps your game turning, for example, increasing those variables that we were talking about before, turning on and off switches, as well as turning on and off self switches as well. Control timer pretty much controls the timer, so you could set a timer. If it reaches 0, then the condition, you could set a timer, and then depending on what the value of the timer is, you could have different conditions, right? So pretty much all of these things right here are the things that you can check against, right? So what I mean by check against is, if this variable 142, let's say we make that 2, right? We could come down and check whether if that variable is 2 or not, right? And then depending on whether if that variable is true, we could do something. I mean, it's higher than 2, higher than or greater than 2, we could do something, and then else we could do something different, right? So that's what it means by game progression. When you change those variables, things progress in your game, and then as they progress, that's where the flow control comes in, where you can then check depending on check different conditions, as well as the conditions that you have here, right? And flow control pretty much controls the flow of the event pages, right? So you could have different conditions, so depending on whether if something is this or that way, you could do different things. You could loop between a different block of code until a certain condition is met, then you could break out of it. You could just exit the whole event process, and you could call a common event, which we'll talk about more in detail. So that's your flow control. Again, we'll get into more details. Party pretty much are things that control the things that your party has, like for example their gold, the items that they have, their weapons they have, and you could change which party members that you actually have. Actor changes the specific actor, right? So it changes things like the HP, the MP, recovers all stats. You could change the name, the class, and a whole bunch of all these other stuff. Pretty much is self-explanatory. Page 2, you have your movements, the things that control the movements of the events that you see on the map, right? So you could transfer a player to a different map. You could set an event location. You could set an event location or a vehicle location. So that means this event, I could make it appear somewhere else, right? Or if you have a vehicle, which we'll talk about later, you can have it appear somewhere else. Scroll map, you could have the map just scroll without following the camera, more for cutscenes and stuff like that. That event move route is kind of like this move route that we saw before, or the move route, however you want to say it, this autonomous movement. When we were looking at this route, this is the same interface, right? So this allows you to control the event's movement. So you could use this for cutscenes, or you could use it for a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Character, so this controls the actual sprite that you see, right, of either the event or the player itself. So you could either erase an event, have it disappear from the map. You could show a balloon icon, show animation on top of the player or any event. You could, you know how like Final Fantasy, you have the party members following right behind you. Well, if you want to just see one of them, you could hit gather and it will move all of them to the lead position, right? Change the followers, so you could change if you see the followers or not, and you could change the transparency if you see the character or not. Picture controls pictures that you want to show on the screen. Like for example, you have the option to actually show like characters on the screen. You could pick their locations and stuff like that. More for cutscenes and stuff like that, and more interactive stuff. You can move the picture around, you could rotate that picture, you could tint the picture, and you could erase the picture. So all of this just controls the pictures you see. Timing, this just pretty much waits. So if you want to wait before you continue with the next event process, you could use that. Screen distance, these control the screen. So fade in, fade out, shake the screen, change the weather effects, and all the good stuff like that. Audio and video pretty much controls audio and video. So if you want to play a video, you could play movie, right? You can play background music, background sounds, fade out the music, fade in the music, and all that good stuff. Scene control controls the scene. So for example, you could start a battle process, right? Or, you know, not really control the scene, like it changes or shows you the different scenes that you will get in the game. Like for example, the battle processing, the shot processing, the name input and processing. You could open the main menu. Ooh, did not mean to do that. You can open the main menu, open the save menu, go straight to the game over screen, or just return to the title. So it just controls which scene that you're seeing, right? System settings, this stuff right here pretty much just changes some system stuff. For example, your actor image, right? So you could change the character and what they look like, right? You could change the formation assets. So if you have party members, you could change whether if you can rearrange them or not. You could change the encounter to disable it or enable it. You could change the menu assets to menu save assets to whether if you could save or open up your menu. You could change some sound effects. You know, these are like the system sound effects, but you could change them from here. Map controls your map stuff. So things like the display name of the map, it could change the whole tile set. So for example, let's say you have a summer tile set and you have a winter tile set that are identical, but one just has snow, the other one doesn't. You could use this change, the change tile set to simulate going from winter to summer type, right? You could change the battle background, you could change the parallax, and you could get the location info. Location info is pretty much either the event ID of that's in that current location, tile ID, region ID, or terrain tag that you are standing on, right? Or you could designate that by these variables, or you could designate it by whatever the player is standing on, right? So let me kind of like go through that again. You could pick a specific location, right? And say, hey, what's here? And then it will return that information to you. You could designate that specific location using variables for your X and your Y, and it will tell you what's there. And you could designate that by if the player is standing on that specific excuse me, tile set or whatever, it will return the information to you, right? Battle distance controls your default battles. I never really use these because I never really use the default battle system, but you could change the again, these are mainly used for when you're inside a battle, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But you could change the enemy HP, MP stats and all that. You could transform the enemy to a different enemy. You could force actions, force blah 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 blah. Cool. Advanced is the cool stuff, right? That's where you could write custom scripts if you want, or you could run plugin commands based on the plugins that you have in your game. So that's pretty much it for the events. Right along this tutorial, I'm going to be making another tutorial called how to set up your events, and also the next, well, I'm going to be making 3 tutorials right now, right? This first tutorial is just setting up your events. I mean, finishing the work through for the events. The next tutorial is going to be setting up that game that we were talking about to kind of bring it all together for you guys, to show you how events work in relations to maps. And then the third tutorial is going to be how to make NPCs. But thank you guys again for tuning in. You guys were lovely, and let's get it.